Thunder fractured the darkening sky as Eleanor Ashcombe braced herself at the prow of the small cutter, her gloved hands white-knuckled on the rail. Rain lashed her face, the salt sting sharp and clean a baptism as she sailed home after 7 years in exile. The cliffs of Dorset rose ahead, brooding and familiar, their battered stone a silent witness to her disgrace and determination alike. A wave slammed against the hull, pitching the boat. Mary, her cousin, let out a frightened gasp, clutching Eleanor's sleeve. "Eleanor, should we not stay below? The men say the tide is treacherous." Eleanor did not flinch. Her eyes were fixed on the jagged silhouette of Hallowig House perched defiantly above the surf. "I have weathered worse than this, Mary," she replied, her voice low but steady. "Besides, I wish to see Hallowig the moment we land. I want to remember what I am owed." Behind them, Mr. Harrow, tall and meticulous even in sodden greatcoat, oversaw the unloading of trunks. He gave Eleanor a nod, his gaze respectful but wary. It was he who had shepherded her investments in the West Indies, transforming the pittance she had carried from England into a fortune that now set village tongues wagging. The wind seemed to relent as the boat scraped against the pebbled shore. Eleanor stepped into the surf, her boots sinking into the cold shingle. The storm had tamed her hair into wild black ribbons about her face, but she walked with the unhurried poise that had once made her the cynosure of London salons. Every eye in the gathering crowd tracked her progress, some curious, others hostile, all hungry for gossip. "She's back then," muttered a fisherman, cap pulled low. "After all these years, and richer than the squire, they say." "Filthy West Indian coin," hissed another woman, drawing her shawl tight. "No good can come of it." Mary trembled beside Eleanor, but Eleanor only lifted her chin, meeting every gaze with calm defiance. "Let them look," she murmured. "Let them wonder." A battered carriage awaited, horses stamping impatiently. Mr. Harrow ushered them inside, shaking droplets from his hat. As the carriage rattled inland, Mary peered anxiously at her cousin. "Do you truly mean to stay, Eleanor, after everything that happened?" "I mean to do more than stay," Eleanor replied, her tone hard as flint. "I mean to reclaim what is mine, and more." The road twisted upward, the storm easing as they neared Hallowig. The estate sprawled across the headland, its chimneys like sentinels against the clouds. Once Eleanor had danced beneath its chandeliers, had laughed in its gardens. Once she had trusted Jonathan Pembroke, her childhood friend, her would-be suitor, until he had turned society against her with whispers and forged letters, orchestrating her ruin with icy precision. Now, the house stood weathered, its grandeur faded. For a moment, her heart twisted. Was it pity or something colder? She pressed her hand to the window, watching the estate draw near. "I will buy Hallowig," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I will see Jonathan Pembroke brought low." Mr. Harrow regarded her in the gloom. "You may find opposition, Miss Ashcombe. Pembroke is not known for yielding." "Then he will learn," Eleanor replied, her voice steel-wrapped in velvet. The carriage creaked to a halt outside the village inn. Already, a knot of villagers had gathered, whispers rising like smoke. A maid bobbed a curtsy, eyes wide. The innkeeper's wife eyed Eleanor's trunk with open suspicion, but Mr. Harrow's brisk efficiency brooked no argument. Inside, Mary wrung her hands. "They will never forgive Eleanor. The scandal." "They will have no choice," Eleanor interrupted, a spark in her eyes. "Money buys many things, Mary, even forgiveness." From the window, Halewig's roofline loomed against the clearing sky, stark and forbidding. Eleanor stood unmoving, framed by the flickering firelight, her silhouette as indomitable as the cliffs themselves. She would have her vengeance. She would reclaim her place. And Jonathan Pembroke, wherever he lurked in the shadows of Halewick, would soon learn that Eleanor Ashcombe was no longer a girl to be cast aside. Outside, the storm receded, but in Eleanor's heart, the tempest had only just begun. Eleanor's boots crunched over the weed-choked gravel as she approached the gates of Ashcombe Manor. Once roses had arched above this wrought iron, their scent drifting on summer air. Now only tangled brambles clung to the rusted bars, and the stone pillars stood lichen-blotched and forlorn. The house itself loomed beyond, windows like hollow eyes, shutters askew, paint flaking in long sorrowful strips. Mary, trailing behind, drew her shawl close. It hardly seems the same place, does it? No, Eleanor replied, voice measured. Yet every stone remembers. Inside the gates, a thin, harried woman emerged from the front door, a fretful child tugging at her skirts. She froze at the sight of the visitors. May I help you, madam? I am Eleanor Ashcombe, Eleanor said quietly. This was my home. Recognition dawned in the woman's eyes, mingled with wariness. We are only tenants, miss. The agent said we might stay another month, till the new arrangements are made. Mary's lips trembled with distress, but Eleanor inclined her head with cool composure. I have no wish to disturb you. I only wish to see the house one last time. A quick, silent tour followed. The drawing room, where laughter once rang, now stank of damp. In the former music room, a child's wooden horse lay abandoned in the dust. Eleanor touched the carved banister, feeling the grooves worn by her own childhood hands. Her throat tightened, but she would not let tears claim her. Outside again, Mr. Harrow awaited with news. Hallowick's creditors are eager, Miss Ashcombe. Pembroke's late father left the estate mortgaged to the hilt, and young Mr. Pembroke, it seems, has been generous to a fault. Orphans, schools, the new bridge, funds have run dry. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. Then Hallowick stands on sand, not stone. He nodded. If we move discreetly, the debts can be acquired, quietly, as you instructed. A slow, cold satisfaction curled within her. See that it is done, Mr. Harrow. Let no one suspect the purchaser. He bowed, lips pressed thin. As you wish, madam. That evening, the vicarage blazed with candlelight, the air thick with the scent of roast and lilies. Reverend Giles, round and beaming, greeted Eleanor with the clumsy warmth of one grateful for novelty. The vicar's wife, Mrs. Giles, offered a brittle smile, ushering Eleanor to the drawing room, where the county's finest had gathered under the pretense of Christian charity. All conversation faltered as Eleanor entered. Heads turned, fans fluttered. The matrons, resplendent in lace and faded dignity, watched her as though she were a rare, dangerous animal. Miss Ashcombe. Jonathan Pembroke stood at the hearth, taller and broader than she remembered, but with the same hawkish cast to his features. His dark hair had grown unruly, and there were new lines at his mouth, a mouth that had once whispered promises, and then, with equal ease, condemned her. Mr. Pembroke, Eleanor replied, every syllable a deliberate act. How unexpected to find you at the vicarage. I thought your evenings were dedicated to nobler pursuits. A flicker of something guilt, anger crossed his face. I do what I can for the parish. That is all any of us can claim. Indeed, she said, her smile cold. Some claims are more costly than others. Conversation resumed, brittle and forced. Mrs. Everleigh, queen of the local gossips, leaned toward her neighbor with a stage whisper. Such a transformation, don't you think? They say she returned with more money than manners. Money buys a great deal, the other murmured, but not a name. Across the room, young Mr. Carroway, cheeks pink with nerves, approached Eleanor with a bow. Miss Ashcombe, may I offer you a glass of punch? My mother wished me to extend her greetings. Eleanor accepted with a gracious nod, but her attention never left Jonathan, who stood apart, arms folded, gaze intent. His pride and unease warred behind his eyes. Dinner was served at a long table groaning with borrowed silver. Reverend Giles extolled Eleanor's bravery in adversity, prompting Mrs. Everleigh to remark, adversity is a fine teacher if one survives it. Laughter rippled, brittle as spun glass. Jonathan addressed her across the table. You must find England changed after your travels. Changed, yes, Eleanor replied, her voice silk over steel. Some faces remain the same, though time has marked them. Some wounds do not heal, Miss Ashcombe. Nor do some debts, she answered, her gaze unwavering. The silence that followed crackled. Plates clattered. Mary reached for Eleanor's hand beneath the table, but Eleanor withdrew, spine straight as a blade. Later, in the vicarage garden, Jonathan intercepted her beneath a dripping yew. Why have you returned, Eleanor? Truly? She studied him, moonlight limning the hard lines of his face. To claim what is mine. You speak in riddles, she smiled. You always did hate puzzles, Jonathan. His jaw clenched. The past cannot be remade. No, but the future is another matter entirely. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. There are rumors, Eleanor, of your intentions toward Hallowig. I will not see it torn apart. She tilted her head. Is it fear for your estate that troubles you, or your conscience? He recoiled as if struck, then turned away, fists clenched at his sides. Eleanor left him in the darkness, the scent of rain and resentment sharp in the air. Inside, the evening wore on. Eligible gentlemen circled her with cautious admiration, their mother scrutinizing every word and gesture. The matron's whispers grew shriller. Was her money truly clean? Was her purpose truly respectable? Yet Eleanor met each inquiry with poise, her laughter measured, her eyes coldly appraising. She was a force now, not a victim, and her campaign had already begun. That night, in her rooms at the inn, Eleanor penned a brief, precise letter. Mr. Harrow, proceed. Secure all notes pertaining to Hallowig's debt. Spare no expense. Ensure my anonymity. She sealed it with her signet, lips curving in a faint, secretive smile. Below, the village clock tolled midnight. Across the fields, Hallowig's windows burned with fitful candlelight, and Jonathan Pembroke stared into the darkness, haunted by regrets he could neither confess nor escape. The game was in motion. Vengeance, at last, was hers to claim. But as dawn crept over the restless sea, neither Eleanor nor Jonathan guessed how swiftly their fates would entwine, or how the cost of revenge would soon eclipse its sweetness. It was the most splendid event the county had seen in years. From the upper lawns of the Ashcombe Dower House, Eleanor surveyed the vibrant spectacle she had so meticulously orchestrated. Silk-draped marquees fluttering in the mild June breeze, tables heavy with hothouse fruit and confections, footmen in bright livery threading between clusters of society's finest. Music spilled from a hired quartet, and laughter sparkled beneath the high, cloudless sky. Every detail was calculated. Nothing of the old Ashcombe neglect lingered. Eleanor had returned not as a penitent, but as a sovereign. Gossip buzzed as briskly as the honeybees among the roses. Miss Ashcombe's West Indian fortune must be inexhaustible, murmured Lady Ferndale, peering through her lorgnette. Did you see the silver service? Quite vulgar, really. Yet I suppose one must adapt. She has invited the Pembrokes, no less, hissed Mrs. Everleigh. A bold provocation, if you ask me. The Pembroke carriage arrived in a hush of expectation. Jonathan emerged first, his figure straight and unreadable, followed by his mother, Lady Pembroke, a fragile wisp in dove-grey silk, and his sister, Catherine, whose nervous smile flickered like candlelight. Eleanor met them at the entrance to the garden, every inch the poised hostess. Lady Pembroke, Miss Pembroke, how very good of you to come. Lady Pembroke's gloved hand trembled as she accepted Eleanor's greeting. Your garden is most revived, Miss Ashcombe. You have worked wonders. Thank you, Lady Pembroke. The land was only sleeping. Eleanor's gaze brushed Jonathan's, cool and implacable. Some things require only patience to bloom again. He bowed stiffly, the muscle in his jaw flexing. Your hospitality is noted, Miss Ashcombe. Hospitality is a duty, Mr. Pembroke, she replied, her smile edged with frost. Especially among neighbors. Guests circled, eager for proximity to drama. Young Mr. Carroway, emboldened by lemonade, pressed Eleanor for a dance. You are the talk of Dorset, Miss Ashcombe. Surely you must be pleased. Talk is only wind, Mr. Carroway. I prefer substance. She offered her hand, sweeping into a waltz, with the grace of a queen reclaiming her court. Meanwhile, Mary found herself by Catherine's side beneath the shade of a lime tree. Catherine's eyes were wide with uncertainty. Miss Ashcombe is so composed. I wish I could be as fearless. Mary smiled warmly. She is braver than she seems, and far kinder than rumor suggests. Are you very anxious, Miss Pembroke? Catherine hesitated, glancing at her mother. We are all anxious. Jonathan tries so hard, but the estate, there are so many debts, so many decisions. Mama is not well, and her voice caught. I fear for what will happen if we lose Hallowig. Mary's hand closed gently over hers. Eleanor would never wish you harm, I'm certain. She is not your enemy. Catherine managed a grateful nod, her eyes shining with hope and worry. As the sun reached its zenith, Eleanor drifted among her guests, exchanging pleasantries with the practiced ease of one who had learned to wear armor made of smiles. Yet beneath the laughter and music, old wounds ached. Lady Pembroke's every polite word was weighted with history. The vicar's toast, to second chances and neighborly accord, drew nervous titters from the assembly. Jonathan cornered Eleanor near the yew hedge, away from prying ears. His voice was low, urgent. You seek to buy Hallowik's debts. Why? You know it is not merely land, not merely a house. It is our home, my mother's life, my sister's safety. Eleanor lifted her chin, eyes flint bright. Did you consider my home, Jonathan, when you whispered your lies? When you watched them cast me out? His gaze did not falter. I regret it. I have regretted it every day. But revenge will not mend what was broken. Her laugh was soft, bitter. You imagine this is revenge? You mistake me. I have learned to value only what is mine by right, and Hallowik was always meant to be mine. He drew closer, desperation roughening his tone. You are not the Eleanor I remember. She looked at him then, truly looked, and for a heartbeat longing warred with anger in her expression. No, I'm not. You saw to that. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back, her composure a shield. Do not warn me off, Jonathan. You have forfeited the right. He watched her go, helpless, and the crowd seemed to close behind her like water. Elsewhere, Lady Pembroke sat in the shade, her gloved hands trembling as she clung to a glass of lemonade. She watched Eleanor from a distance, her eyes haunted with memories and fear. As the afternoon waned, the conversation grew bolder. Mrs. Everleigh approached Eleanor directly, her tone honeyed with malice. You must forgive us, Miss Ashcombe. We country ladies are not accustomed to such cosmopolitan entertainments. I hope you do not intend to upend all our little traditions. Eleanor smiled. Tradition and progress can coexist, Mrs. Everleigh, provided tradition is not merely an excuse for injustice. The matron colored, but before she could retort, the music began anew. Mary returned to Eleanor's side, her cheeks flushed. Catherine is in low spirits. She fears for her family. Eleanor's resolve flickered. I am not blind to their suffering, Mary, but I will not forget what was done to me. Mary's voice was gentle. Nor can you ignore your own heart forever. The sun dipped lower, gilding the garden in amber light. Catherine, lingering at the edge of the crowd, cast anxious glances at her brother and mother. Jonathan stood with his back to the party, shoulders rigid, gaze fixed on the horizon as if searching for answers in the sea. As guests departed, Eleanor bade them farewell with perfect poise. Only when the last carriage rolled away did she allow her hands to tremble. In the quiet that followed, Eleanor stood alone on the lawn, the ghosts of laughter and betrayal whispering in the dusk. She had proved her strength, but the cost was written in every glance, every unspoken word. From the terrace, Jonathan watched her, his heart heavy with guilt and longing. He could not undo the past, yet neither could he bear to lose Hallowik or Eleanor a second time. Inside, Mary found Catherine in tears and drew her into a quiet embrace. Things will change, I promise. Eleanor's heart is not as hard as she pretends. Catherine nodded, hope flickering anew. Eleanor, alone beneath the gathering night, gazed toward Hallowik's distant chimneys. The battle lines had been drawn, but the war between memory and desire had only just begun. In the hush of twilight, a single letter arrived for Eleanor, its seal unknown. She broke it open, heart pounding, as the garden's shadows deepened and the future twisted, uncertain before her. The wind that swept the Hallowik fields that week carried little comfort. Clouds hung low and heavy over the estate, pressing down on Jonathan Pembroke's shoulders as he strode through the muddy lanes, boots caked with the toil of his laborers. Each day brought fresh anxieties, another urgent note from a creditor, another request for repairs, another desperate appeal from a tenant whose roof leaked or whose child was ailing. Hallowik, that proud seat of Pembroke generations, seemed to Jonathan on the verge of crumbling before his eyes. He stood outside the old dairy, watching Mrs. Hodge bundle her youngest child in a frayed shawl. Thank you, sir, for the coal, she said, voice trembling with gratitude. We'd have frozen elsewise. Jonathan managed a tired smile. It is the least I can do. if there is more you require." She shook her head quickly. "No, sir, you do too much already." But as Jonathan turned away, his mind whirled with figures. The coal supplier's bill, the mason's wages, the interest on the mortgage, each sum a stone in the pocket of a drowning man. He had met with every banker in the county, written to every distant cousin, and still the money would not stretch. Worse yet, each effort to secure a loan or renegotiate terms was met by an implacable new obstacle. The bank would not extend credit, citing a change in the structure of holdings. An anonymous party had acquired a controlling share of his debts and was now calling in notes, quietly but inexorably. He sat late into the night in his study, the fire guttering low as he pored over account ledgers. Catherine slipped in, her cheeks pale and eyes rimmed with worry. "John, you must sleep. Mama is frightened you are never at table, and the servants whisper." He managed a weary smile. "I cannot sleep, Kit, not until I find a way forward." She hovered at his elbow, hesitant. "Is it true what they say? That someone is buying up our debts?" He hesitated. "It is true, but I will not let Hallowig go without a fight. I promise you that." Yet, as Catherine retreated, Jonathan pressed his head into his hands, despair threatening to swallow him whole. A name haunted his thoughts: Eleanor. Impossible she would not, could not, be behind such machinations. And yet, her sudden return, her transformation, the subtle glint in her eyes, he could not ignore the possibility. Still, to confront her openly would only feed the village gossips, risk further scandal, and perhaps drive her to strike more cruelly. He would have to watch and wait. Across the fields, Eleanor Ashcombe moved through her own days with careful poise. She read the County Gazette with cool satisfaction as reports filtered in. Halwick's creditors were restless, the Pembroke accounts in disarray. Mr. Harrow's letters arrived daily, crisp and precise. "The mortgage on the Northfields is now in our hands, madam. The bank will not renew the Pembroke note without your leave." Yet the thrill of victory was not as sweet as she had imagined. She watched the Pembrokes from a distance. Lady Pembroke's shrinking figure, Catherine's anxious glances, Jonathan's dogged determination, and found herself unsettled. At Mary's gentle urging, Eleanor agreed to attend the upcoming ball at Everley House, the grandest event of the late summer. "You cannot remain apart forever," Mary chided, adjusting Eleanor's sapphire necklace with sisterly affection. "If you do not show yourself, they will say you are ashamed." Eleanor's laugh was brittle. "Let them say what they wish. I am beyond their judgments now." The night of the ball, Everley House glittered with hundreds of candles and the feverish anticipation of a county starved for novelty. The great hall shimmered with silks and jewels, the air thick with the perfume of crushed roses and unspoken rivalries. Eleanor entered at Mary's side, her gown of deep blue silk, a deliberate echo of her former life, a declaration that she had returned, transformed and unbowed. Whispers eddied through the crowd as she passed. "She grows more beautiful with every humiliation," Lady Ferndale declared, voice pitched for all to hear. But at what cost? Eleanor lifted her head, every inch the queen in exile. She greeted acquaintances with practiced civility, exchanging cool pleasantries with Lady Pembroke, who gripped Catherine's arm as if afraid her daughter might vanish into scandal at a word. Jonathan appeared in the ballroom doorway, his black coat immaculate, his expression composed but shadowed. He surveyed the room with a soldier's wariness, only relaxing when he caught sight of Catherine and their mother. As he crossed to them, Eleanor watched him, a knot tightening in her chest. Midway through the evening, disaster struck. A commotion erupted near the refreshment table. A careless footman had upset a tray of punch, sending crimson rivers across the marble floor. Worse, the punch spilled directly onto the gown of Miss Lydia Carroway, the Everleys' favored niece and the belle of the evening. Her shriek silenced the room. Lady Everley's face blanched. "Fetch her mother! And someone please, the laundress!" The guests began to murmur, scandal sparking in their eyes. In that instant, Eleanor acted. She crossed swiftly to Miss Carroway, voice calm and authoritative. "Come, Miss Carroway, let us attend to you in the retiring room. Mary, fetch some vinegar and cold water." Jonathan, moving just as quickly, intercepted the footman, who was near tears. "It was an accident," Jonathan said, his voice steady. "Go to the kitchens and ask Mrs. Potts for a cloth. Tell her Mr. Pembroke sent you." Together, Eleanor and Jonathan steered the situation with a quiet competence that stilled the growing panic. In the retiring room, Eleanor soothed Miss Carroway, helping her out of the ruined overskirt and reassuring her mother with gentle authority. Mary arrived with water and salt, and within minutes the worst of the stain was lessened. Meanwhile, Jonathan returned to the ballroom, reassuring Lady Everleigh and redirecting the guests' attention. "The musicians will play a quadrille," he announced, his voice ringing with confidence. "Let us give Miss Carroway time to recover." Within the hour, the incident had been contained, and the party's gaiety resumed, albeit with a new undercurrent of admiration for Eleanor and Jonathan's deft partnership. Guests whispered behind gloved hands, eyes flicking between them. Later, as the evening waned, Eleanor found herself alone on the terrace, the night air cool against her flushed cheeks. Jonathan joined her, his expression unguarded for the first time that evening. "You saved the Everleigh's ball," he said, a rueful smile tugging at his lips. "You always did know how to turn disaster into triumph." Eleanor's gaze flickered. "Necessity is the mother of invention. And you," she hesitated, the words catching, "you were always quick to mend what others broke." He studied her, his eyes searching. "We worked well together once." She looked away, the memories sharp as glass. Once. A long silence stretched between them, filled with the music drifting from the ballroom and the distant hum of laughter. Then Jonathan spoke, his voice low and earnest. "Eleanor, I must ask, are you behind these anonymous investors who plague me? The debts, the notes called in, the sudden obstacles at every turn." Eleanor's composure did not falter, but her heart thudded painfully. "You flatter me, Mr. Pembroke. I'm not so omnipotent." His lips twisted. "You are many things, Eleanor, but you are not cruel." She met his gaze, and for a moment, the old camaraderie shimmered between them. Something gentler, untouched by bitterness. "I am what I must be," she said softly, "and so are you." He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you are my enemy, then be merciful. If you are my friend, then help me." The plea in his voice shook her more than she cared to admit. For an instant, she saw not the man who had orchestrated her exile, but the boy who had once climbed trees with her, who had laughed and dreamed and believed the world was theirs to shape. She turned away, her voice cool once more. "The world is not as simple as you wish, Jonathan. We are none of us innocent." He did not press her, but when he left, she felt his absence keenly. Inside, Lady Pembroke's anxiety was growing. She watched Eleanor and Jonathan's every interaction with open dread. "You must not allow her to unsettle you, Jonathan," she whispered later, clutching his hand. "The county will talk. They will say, 'Oh, I cannot bear it.'" Jonathan soothed her gently. "Let them talk, Mamma. There are greater things at stake than gossip." But the whispers would not be contained. By morning, every drawing room from Weymouth to Lyme buzzed with speculation. Miss Ashcombe and Mr. Pembroke reunited in adversity. Is it vengeance or romance that drives her? Will Hallowig change hands after all? For Eleanor, the aftermath was a study in contradictions. She felt her resolve wavering as she watched Jonathan's devotion to his tenants and his family, his willingness to sacrifice his own comfort, his pride for those in his care. It was not the arrogance of old, but something humbler, nobler, and it unsettled her. Mary, ever perceptive, broached the subject as they rode home. "You saw him tonight. How he cares for them all. Perhaps there is more goodness in Jonathan than you wish to admit." Eleanor stared out the carriage window, her voice barely audible. "Goodness does not erase betrayal, Mary. Nor does suffering." "No," Mary agreed softly, "but it can change what comes next." Eleanor said nothing more, but her thoughts were in turmoil. Each day, she felt the lines of battle shifting, the certainty of her vengeance blurring with the ache of memory and the unfamiliar pull of hope. In the days that followed, Jonathan's financial woes deepened. The anonymous investors pressed their advantage, and the threat of losing Hallowig loomed ever larger. Yet even as he struggled, Jonathan found unexpected solace in small victories: a new roof for the dairy, a village child nursed back to health, Catherine's laughter returning for a fleeting moment. And always, always, the county watched, eager for the next chapter in the drama that had ensnared them all. One afternoon, as autumn's first leaves began to scatter across the drive, Eleanor received a letter unsigned, written in a hand she did not recognize. The words were few but chilling. "You are not the only one with secrets, Miss Ashcombe. Beware the price of victory." Eleanor's heart pounded as she read and reread the note, a cold certainty settling over her. The game was no longer hers alone, and somewhere in the gathering dusk, the past stirred, restless and unquiet, promising that the true reckoning was yet to come. The first frost of October glittered on the lawns of Hallowik as Eleanor Ashcombe stepped from her carriage, her chin lifted in silent challenge. The air was sharp, every breath a reminder that victory so long pursued was finally within her grasp. In her gloved hand, she held the letter from Mr. Harrow, the final confirmation. With a single stroke of her signature, she would become Hallowik's principal creditor, the fate of the Pembroke estate and its master resting in her hands. Inside the great hall, the scent of beeswax and old stone mingled with the hum of anxious voices. The social season was at its peak, and Eleanor's every move was watched, analyzed, and whispered about. Suitors circled her like moths, drawn by the heat of her fortune and the intrigue of her reputation. Lord Fenton, all charming smiles and practiced compliments, pressed his claim at every assembly. Mr. Linton, a rising star in Parliament, dispatched bouquets and sonnets by the dozen. Yet Eleanor regarded them with polite detachment, her gaze forever drifting to the distant silhouette of Hallowik and the man who haunted its halls. Jonathan moved through his days with a grim sense of duty, each step weighted by his mother's expectations and the knowledge of his impending ruin. Lady Pembroke's ambitions had grown more desperate. "You must speak to Miss Carroway, Jonathan," she urged, her voice brittle with hope. "Her father is prepared to settle a fortune upon her marriage. It is your duty." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "My duty is to Hallowik and to you and Catherine. I will do what is required." That evening, at the Carroways' ball, Jonathan danced with Lydia beneath a chandelier that glittered like ice. Lydia's laugh rang high and sweet as she recounted her Parisian adventures, her blue eyes alight with the certainty of triumph. Yet Jonathan's mind wandered, his gaze drawn again and again to Eleanor, who moved through the crowd with unassailable grace, her smile enigmatic, her laughter measured. The county's charitable bazaar, held in the draughty nave of St. Stephen's, brought Eleanor and Jonathan together once more. Mary and Catherine busied themselves at the cake stall, while Lady Pembroke presided over the raffle with regal authority. Eleanor's table, overflowing with Caribbean preserves and embroidered linens, drew a constant stream of admirers. As the afternoon wore on, Jonathan lingered near Eleanor's stall, his manner taut and formal. A child spilled lemonade at their feet, and they stooped together to mop it up, their hands brushing in a fleeting electric moment. Eleanor straightened first, her composure unbroken. "You need not pretend, Jonathan. We are beyond civility." He looked at her, his expression raw. "Must we always be at war?" Her voice was low, edged with pain. "You made me your enemy. You stood by while they called me faithless, while they turned me out. You of all people knew the truth and said nothing." He exhaled, shoulders slumping. "I was afraid. My father was dying. My mother, she was so fragile. If there was scandal, we would have lost everything. I thought I could contain it, that it would pass. But I was a coward, Eleanor. I let them destroy you to save ourselves." Eleanor's breath caught, the confession both balm and poison. "You destroyed me," she whispered. "You were my friend, more than that." Jonathan's voice shook. "I know. There has not been a day." She cut him off, pride and anger flashing. "Do not ask for forgiveness. You did not earn it." He stepped closer, his gaze anguished. "But what are you now, Eleanor? Are you here for vengeance or for justice? Or is it something else?" For a heartbeat, the distance between them seemed to vanish. the memories of laughter and longing stirring beneath the bitterness. She wanted, desperately, to reach for him, to believe in the possibility of repair. But she saw in his eyes the weight of all that had passed, the betrayals, the silences, the choices that could not be unmade. "I am here to take what is mine," she said at last, her voice brittle with unshed tears. "I will not be cast aside again." Their hands brushed as she turned away, the contact lingering like a promise and a wound. He watched her go, his face pale, his lips pressed into a line of sorrow and longing. Outside, the sun dipped behind the churchyard yews, shadows lengthening over the crowd. The rumors began at once, Eleanor and Jonathan seen together, their voices raised, their faces drawn. Lady Pembroke's anxiety grew feverish. Lydia Carraway's laughter grew brittle. Mary, watching from a distance, saw the pain in Eleanor's eyes and the confusion in Jonathan's, and wondered if any victory could be worth such cost. That night, in her study, Eleanor laid out the final papers. Mr. Harrow placed them before her, his expression grave. "Once you sign, Hallowig's fate is sealed. There will be no turning back." Eleanor hesitated, pen poised above the parchment. Doubt gnawed at her. Was this justice or merely another form of ruin? Was it truly enough to triumph if her heart remained unsettled, her conscience unquiet? She signed her name with a flourish, the ink pooling like spilled blood. As midnight tolled, Eleanor stared into the darkness beyond her window, the fields of Hallowig stretching away beneath the cold stars. The prize was hers at last, yet peace felt further away than ever. And far across the night, a carriage door slammed. A figure hurried down the drive, a messenger bearing news that would set the whole county ablaze and force Eleanor and Jonathan into choices neither could have foreseen. The first chill of winter crept through Hallowig's corridors, as news of the estate's impending sale swept through the county like a bitter wind. Jonathan Pembroke endured the humiliating whispers with clenched fists and a rigid jaw, his every step shadowed by the pity of old friends and the veiled triumph of rivals. Servants faltered in their duties, their eyes downcast. Tenants arrived with anxious faces, seeking assurance he could no longer offer. In the market square, matrons traded rumors in tones both gloating and sorrowful. The end of Hallowig, can you imagine? He ought never have trusted those creditors, nor that woman, Miss Ashcombe. Lady Pembroke retreated behind drawn curtains, her health faltering with every day of uncertainty. Catherine moved through the house like a ghost, her laughter stilled, her hopes for the future shriveling with each new report from the lawyers. Meanwhile, Eleanor Ashcombe's carriage arrived at Halewick, beneath a sky the color of pewter. She stepped onto the gravel drive with measured calm, her face unreadable, her heart waging war within her breast. She was greeted by a footman who hesitated before leading her through echoing halls to the library, Jonathan's domain, and the heart of Hallowig's legacy. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and memory. Floor-to-ceiling shelves rose on all sides, laden with volumes that had shaped generations of Pembrokes. A fire crackled fitfully in the grate, unable to dispel the chill. Jonathan stood by the window, silhouetted against the pale afternoon light, his posture rigid as a soldier at judgment. He did not turn as she entered. "Miss Ashcombe, to what do we owe the honor of your visit? Or is it merely business now?" Eleanor's voice was cool, but beneath it trembled something raw. "You know why I'm here, Jonathan. Your solicitor arranged the meeting. The sale must be finalized." He faced her then, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and something fiercer pride, pain, defiance. "You could have sent your agent. There was no need to come yourself." "I wish to see the place," she replied, her tone flint-edged, "to know what I am buying or destroying." He laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "And do you find satisfaction in it? Is this the revenge you dreamed of, Eleanor? To watch Hallowig fall by your hand?" Eleanor's composure cracked. "You speak of revenge as if you never earned it. You destroyed me once, Jonathan. You let them cast me out for your own convenience." His fists clenched at his sides. "You think I did not suffer? That I do not suffer now?" She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You had a choice. You could have spoken the truth. Instead, you let me bear the shame alone." He met her gaze, wounded and furious. "You do not understand. My father was dying. My mother, she would not have survived a scandal. I did what I thought was necessary. Necessary for whom? Her words cut deep. For your family. For yourself. What about me, Jonathan? I was not necessary. The air between them crackled with anger and something older, deeper. For a moment neither spoke, the silence alive with memory. Stolen laughter in Hallowick's gardens, whispered promises by moonlight, the sweet ache of first love. Finally, Jonathan's voice broke the spell, low and ragged. I have paid for my cowardice every day since. But this is cruelty, Eleanor. You hold all the power now. What will you do with it? Eleanor's resolve wavered. I do not know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I wanted retribution. But I see only ruin yours. Mine. Everyone's. He reached for her then, his hand hovering at her sleeve, but she pulled back, panic and longing warring in her eyes. Don't, she pleaded. I cannot bear it. He let his hand fall. The moment shattered. You have your victory, Eleanor. Take it, but do not pretend it will heal anything. She fled the library, her composure in tatters, the echo of his words ringing in her ears. Outside, dusk had fallen, shrouding Hallowick in melancholy shadows. Eleanor found Mary waiting in the carriage, her face etched with concern. You are pale, Eleanor. Was it so terrible? Eleanor stared out at the fading light, her voice distant. It was worse than I imagined. I thought I would feel triumphant. Instead, I feel lost. Mary reached for her hand. You are not cruel, Eleanor. You are hurt. That is not the same. But what if I have become what I despise? Eleanor whispered, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. What if all I have done is destroy? Mary squeezed her hand, her own eyes shining. There is still time to choose differently. The future is not yet written. Back at Hallowick, Jonathan wandered the silent corridors, haunted by the weight of defeat. He paused in his father's study, the room thick with dust and the scent of old paper, as he sorted through a pile of correspondence bills, legal notices, fading invitations. His hand closed on a letter, its seal broken, but the writing unmistakably Eleanor's. He sank into the old leather chair, heart pounding as he unfolded the page. Dearest Jonathan, I do not know if you will ever read this. By the time you find it, I may be gone, and you may not care, but I cannot leave without telling you that I loved you once, foolishly, with all the hope a girl can hold. If you choose to believe the worst of me, I will bear it, but I will never forget what we were, and what we might have been, if only you had trusted me. Jonathan's breath caught, the words blurring as the enormity of his failure crashed over him. How easily he had let fear govern him. How swiftly he had traded love for loyalty to a family already lost to time and pride. He buried his face in his hands, grief and shame a bitter tide. Outside the study, Lady Pembroke waited, her frail figure dwarfed by the panelled hall. Jonathan, you must speak to Miss Carroway. The family, our friends, they expect it. Jonathan looked up, hollow-eyed. Mother, does duty mean so little that I must barter myself for a fortune? Even now? She hesitated, her voice trembling. We are nothing without Hallowick. I am nothing. Catherine is nothing without you. He rose, the old bitterness draining away, replaced by something quieter, more resolute. We are more than land, Mama. More than a name. As evening deepened, the house filled with the clamor of decision. Catherine cornered Jonathan in the corridor, her voice trembling with anxiety. Will we have to leave, John? Will she truly take it all? He drew her into a fierce embrace. I do not know, Kit, but whatever happens, we will face it together. At the inn, Eleanor stared into the fire, Mary beside her, the silence between them full of unspoken fears. Do you regret it? Mary asked softly. Eleanor closed her eyes. I do not know what I feel. Vengeance was supposed to bring justice, but I see only pain, his, mine, yours. I do not know how to forgive, or if I should. Mary's voice was gentle. Perhaps forgiveness is not a gift for others, but a mercy for ourselves. Eleanor wept, silent and unobserved, her tears falling for everything lost and everything yet to be decided. Beyond the inn, beyond Hallowick's battered walls, the county held its breath. The old world was dying, and with it the certainties of youth and vengeance. What would rise in its place remained uncertain, shaped by choices still unmade and truth still unspoken. And as the night deepened, a single candle burned in the library at Halewick. Jonathan's shadow long across the floor as he read Eleanor's letter again and again, searching for forgiveness in the spaces between her words, and wondering what he might yet do to deserve it. Outside, a messenger approached the inn at a gallop, a sealed missive in hand, bringing news that would force Eleanor to a decision from which there would be no turning back. The dawn that broke over Halewick was pale and unforgiving, its fragile light glinting off frost-silvered fields and the cold stone of the great house. In the entry hall, trunks stood stacked and ready, the air thick with the silence of endings. It was done. Eleanor Ashcombe's purchase of Halewick was now official. The ink was dry, the deed sealed, and the Pembroke family's centuries-old claim was no more than a line in the ledger of memory. Lady Pembroke drifted ghost-like through the corridors, her hand trailing along familiar paneling, her lips pressed together in silent misery. Catherine, eyes red from sleepless tears, clung to Mary in the morning room, seeking comfort in the gentle strength of her friend. Eleanor stood in the library, her gaze fixed on the fire as it struggled to warm the cavernous space. Mr. Harrow had departed, the legalities concluded, and all that remained was the slow unraveling of a life. She waited, heart pounding, for the moment she would be called to the final reckoning, the one that would test whether victory could ever taste like peace. When Jonathan appeared in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the pale winter sun, Eleanor straightened, every muscle taut with anticipation. He entered quietly, dignity in every line of his bearing despite the shadows beneath his eyes. "It is time," he said, his voice even. "Would you walk with me, Eleanor? There are things I wish to show you one last time." She nodded, her words caught behind the shield of her composure. They crossed the threshold together, stepping out into the brittle morning. The grass crunched beneath their boots as they followed the familiar path toward the ancient yew by the lake, a place that belonged to their shared childhood, untouched by scandal or loss. For a while, neither spoke. The silence was not hostile, but dense with memory. At last, Jonathan paused, gazing out over the water where wild swans glided through the mist. "Do you remember when we built a raft here?" he said, a wry smile flickering across his lips. "You insisted we could sail to France." Eleanor's answering laugh was soft, colored by regret. "We made it as far as the reeds. I ruined my favorite slippers." Jonathan's gaze lingered on her face. "I have thought of that day often, before everything changed, before I changed." She met his eyes, pain and tenderness mingling. "You were not alone. I changed too. It is the way of the world, I suppose. Innocence never survives the storm." He turned away, staring at the distant horizon. "I wish I could say I am proud of what I have done, that I fought for Halewick with honor. But the truth is I lost as much by silence as by action." Eleanor's voice trembled. "I wish I could say this victory brings me comfort. I told myself it would, that if I could hold Halewick, I would be whole again. But I feel only empty." They walked on, the chill wind tugging at Eleanor's hair, the brittle grass crunching beneath Jonathan's steps. At the old orchard he paused, running his hand over the gnarled trunk of an apple tree. "Do you remember the harvest dances?" he asked. "You always wanted to lead, even when you tripped over your own feet." She smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You always let me win." He shook his head, a trace of mischief surfacing. "You never needed my permission. You conquered Halewick long before any solicitor put pen to paper." The words hung between them, fraught with old affection and a sorrow too deep for speech. They wandered back along the path, the house looming ahead, no longer Jonathan's fortress, but Eleanor's domain. The weight of the moment pressed in, the enormity of what had been gained and lost. At the steps, Jonathan stopped. He faced Eleanor, searching her features as if to memorize them. "I do not know what your future will hold here," he said, voice steady but rough-edged. "But I hope, truly hope, you will find the peace I could not give you. You are mistress of Halwick now in every sense. I wish you happiness, Eleanor. It is what you deserve, no matter what has passed between us. She swallowed hard, her pride warring with grief. Thank you, Jonathan. Her voice faltered. I wish I could have hated you. I wish it were easier to say goodbye. He reached for her hand, holding it between his own. For a heartbeat, old passion flared bittersweet and fierce, the echo of all that might have been. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything. She squeezed his hand, her own apology unspoken but shining in her eyes. Then she let go, and he turned away, crossing the threshold into history. Inside, Mary waited, watching Eleanor with quiet concern. Catherine clung to her arm, her composure finally breaking. Will we ever see Halwick again? Catherine sobbed, her voice muffled against Mary's shoulder. Mary held her close, rocking gently. You will always belong here, Catherine. No one, not even Eleanor, can take your memories, and I will write to you every week. I promise. In the silence that followed, Eleanor slumped into a chair, her strength spent. Mary knelt beside her, her hand gentle on Eleanor's arm. Forgive him, Mary urged softly, and forgive yourself. Victory without forgiveness is nothing but another kind of exile. Eleanor closed her eyes, the truth of it stinging more than any defeat. The great house loomed around her, vast and echoing. She had won Halwick, but the cost would echo long after the keys had changed hands. Outside, carriages rumbled on the drive as the Pembrokes prepared to depart. The staff gathered to say their farewells, tears shining in their eyes. Lady Pembroke, frail but upright, accepted Eleanor's curtsy with distant courtesy, her gaze unreadable. Jonathan lingered at the gates, his dignity unbroken, his spirit battered but not destroyed. He glanced back once, catching Eleanor's eye through the window. For a moment there was only understanding, wordless, weary, and deep as the roots of the ancient yew. As dusk fell, Eleanor wandered the empty halls, the silence pressing in. Every room whispered with memories, laughter, betrayal, longing, loss. She ran her hand along the carved banister, feeling the pulse of history beneath her fingertips. In the nursery, Catherine's forgotten shawl lay draped over a chair. In the music room, a single faded note lingered on the pianoforte. Eleanor gathered these remnants, her heart aching for all that could never be restored. When she returned to the drawing room, Mary sat waiting, her expression gentle but resolute. You have a choice, Eleanor. The past cannot be changed. But what you do with Halwick, and with your own heart, that is yours alone. Eleanor nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. The house was hers. The future uncertain. And somewhere beyond the gates, Jonathan's carriage vanished into the night, carrying with it the last fragile hopes of forgiveness, and a love that might yet find a new beginning. Outside, a figure emerged from the shadowed lane, a stranger bearing a letter that would change everything, and draw Eleanor once more into the tangled web of duty, desire, and fate. Eleanor's arrival as mistress of Halwick was met with neither celebration nor warmth. The morning her carriage rolled through the gates, the staff lined the drive in wary silence, their faces a study in suspicion and wounded pride. Mrs. Welling, the housekeeper of 20 years, bobbed a stiff curtsy, but her eyes were hard. The undergardeners exchanged whispers, and even the stable boys kept their distance as if Eleanor carried a contagion more dangerous than scandal. Change. She moved through the echoing halls with measured steps, her presence unsettling the dust of centuries. The keys on her chatelaine clinked softly, a symbol of authority that felt both weighty and precarious. Rooms that had once hummed with Pembroke laughter now seemed to hold their breath. At dinner, her instructions for simple fare, no more imported delicacies, less waste, were met with raised brows. The butler, Mr. Spence, delivered her requests to the kitchen as though relaying orders from an invading army. Yet Eleanor was undeterred. She summoned the estate bailiff, demanded honest accounts, and called each tenant to the hall for private interviews. She listened to tales of leaking roofs, of winter hunger, and long-ignored repairs. Within a fortnight, she had cut rents for the poorest, ordered new plows, and pledged funds for a village school and a dispensary. Her reforms rippled through the countryside, sowing hope among some and resentment among others. "It is not the Ashcombe way," Mrs. Welling complained to the staff. "And it was never the Pembroke way. She'll turn the place upside down, just you see." The villagers, their pride stung, eyed Eleanor with skepticism. At market, the baker's wife snubbed her greeting. The blacksmith muttered about foreign money and ladies who do not know their place. In the drawing rooms of neighboring estates, the gentry's whispers sharpened to knives. "Miss Ashcombe intends to play the benevolent queen, does she?" scoffed Lady Ferndale at tea. "She will learn that charity cannot purchase breeding. She cannot hope to buy our respect," Mrs. Everleigh declared. "And as for the rumors, well, I dare say some are true." Only Mary stood steadfast, offering gentle counsel as the tide of opposition rose. "You are doing good, Eleanor," she said late one evening, as Eleanor stared into the fire, her hands trembling from another day of resistance. "It may take time, but they will see your heart." Eleanor shook her head, the embers casting shadows on her face. "I wonder if I have one, Mary, or if I left it behind with everything else." The isolation grew heavier as winter deepened. Invitations from the local gentry ceased. At church, the pews around Eleanor remained conspicuously empty. Even the vicar, caught between gratitude for her donations and loyalty to his flock, greeted her with a strained politeness. Then, one grey afternoon, Miss Lydia Caraway arrived at Halwick, her cheeks flushed with purpose. She was shown into the drawing room, where Eleanor received her with cool courtesy. "Miss Caraway, to what do I owe this visit?" Lydia hesitated, glancing at her gloved hands. "I come not as a rival, Miss Ashcombe, but as a messenger, perhaps even as a friend. I wish to set to rest some unkind talk." Eleanor's lips tightened. "Rumors thrive here, Miss Caraway. I am past caring." "But you should care," Lydia replied quietly, "because the worst of them concern Jonathan. They say he was cast out for want of money. They think him weak or dishonorable. I wish you to know the truth." Eleanor's composure faltered. "Speak plainly, I beg you." Lydia's eyes were earnest. "Jonathan could have had my fortune, my father's blessing, and the security of Halwick. My parents pressed him. He refused me, Eleanor, not for pride, but because he would not bind himself to a loveless marriage, nor use me to rescue the estate. He could not offer what was not in his heart." Eleanor stared at her, the truth striking deeper than any wound. "He never told me." Lydia smiled, a little sadly. "Because he is too proud. Or perhaps too ashamed. But I thought you should know. He chose principle over comfort, and he has paid dearly for it." As Lydia departed, Eleanor stood at the window, watching her carriage disappear down the frost-edged lane. The revelation unsettled her, stirring guilt and something warmer, a hope she hardly dared name. Meanwhile, in a modest cottage near the green, Jonathan Pembroke lived quietly, his days given to service. He taught children their letters in the church vestry, visited the sick, and organized relief for the poorest tenants. His clothes were plain, his hands roughened by work, but he held his head high, meeting each new challenge with stoic resolve. The villagers, slow to forgive, watched him with curiosity. Some softened, recalling his kindness in better days. Others, still smarting from Halwick's change of hands, kept their distance. Catherine, pale but steadfast, assisted at his side, her laughter returning in small bursts as she found purpose in helping others. News of Eleanor's reforms reached Jonathan in fragments, tales of lowered rents, new thatching, warm meals for the children. He listened in silence, pride and regret warring within him. The parish fete arrived on a bright, cold Saturday, drawing the village and neighboring families to the green. Ribbons fluttered from tents, children shrieked around the maple, and the air hummed with the promise of new beginnings. Eleanor attended with Mary, her presence both spectacle and provocation. She moved among the stalls, purchasing preserves from the vicar's wife, offering coins for the school fund. Some thanked her, others merely nodded, but the mood was softer than it had been in months. Jonathan stood by the cake stall, sleeves rolled, laughing as he helped a group of boys set up tables. When he saw Eleanor, the laughter faltered. For a moment, time contracted, childhood summers, moonlit gardens, the ache of all they had lost. He approached, hesitant. "Miss Ashcombe, you grace our fate with your presence." She managed to smile, her poise brittle. I could hardly keep away, Mr. Pembroke. I hear your treacle tart is the talk of Dorset. His lips twitched. I have many talents you never suspected. She glanced away, struggling for composure. You are well, I hope. As well as can be expected, he said softly. I have found a measure of peace. Service is its own reward. Their words were careful, but beneath them ran a current of longing and regret. Silence stretched between them, charged and intimate. At length Jonathan spoke. I heard of your changes at Hellowick. You have done more good in a season than I managed in years. Eleanor shook her head. I have made enemies as well as friends. I am not sure what I am building, only that it is not what I expected. He studied her, compassion flickering in his eyes. We are both exiles, Eleanor. Perhaps that is what binds us now. She met his gaze, the old ache rising. Perhaps exile is not the end, but the beginning. Before he could reply, Catherine hurried over. Cheeks flushed from the cold, Mary at her side. The four stood together for a moment, the past shadows receding in the winter sunlight. As the fete wound down, Eleanor lingered by the gate, watching Jonathan distribute cakes to a group of children. Mary joined her, slipping her arm through Eleanor's. Things are changing, Eleanor, for all of us. The village may never accept you as they did the Pembrokes, but you have won respect where it matters most. Eleanor nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in months. I'm not sure what happens next, Mary, but I am beginning to believe it may be something good. As dusk fell and lanterns glimmered on the green, Eleanor and Jonathan's eyes met across the crowd, uncertain, hopeful, bound by all that had passed and all that might yet be. Yet even as the air filled with laughter and the scent of baking bread, a figure lingered at the edge of the fete, watching Eleanor with narrowed eyes. A reminder that the wounds of the past were not so easily healed, and that the greatest tests of forgiveness and love still lay ahead. The warning bell clanged through the night, its frantic peal slicing the hush that had settled over Hallowick. Eleanor woke to shouts and the acrid scent of smoke seeping through her chamber window. She threw on her wrapper and hurried down the grand staircase, her heart thundering. At the front door, Mary met her, pale and wild-eyed. The cottages, Eleanor! There's a fire at the far end of the lane. Without hesitation, Eleanor gathered her skirts and ran into the darkness, Mary close behind. The cold air bit at her skin, but already she could see the orange glare against the night sky, hear the terrified cries of children and the frantic barking of dogs. Villagers were forming a bucket line from the well, their faces streaked with soot and panic. "Keep the buckets moving," Eleanor called, her voice clear and commanding. "Children to the green, Mrs. Hodge, take them. Mr. Spence, see to the old folk, no one goes back inside." Through the smoke, she saw Jonathan, his shirt open at the throat, hair plastered to his brow with sweat directing men to douse the thatch. He spotted Eleanor and without pause, joined her at the heart of the chaos. "We need to get everyone clear of the west row," he shouted. "The wind's changed, the flames could jump the lane." Eleanor nodded, her eyes fierce. "I'll take the north end, you the west. Mary, fetch blankets and water quickly." Together, they moved from cottage to cottage, forcing open doors, lifting frightened children into waiting arms, shouting reassurance above the roar of the fire. Twice, Eleanor dashed inside smoke-choked rooms to lead out elderly tenants, refusing to heed the sting in her eyes or the trembling in her limbs. A sudden scream rang out. Jonathan turned, saw a small boy trapped at an upper window, his face white with terror. Without a second thought, Jonathan scrambled up the porch beams and hauled himself through the smoke, disappearing as flames licked at the eaves. Time froze for Eleanor. She pressed a hand to her mouth, barely breathing until Jonathan reappeared, the child clutched to his chest. He half fell, half slid to the ground, and landed hard in the mud. Eleanor rushed to him, relief flooding her as she checked the boy for burns, then Jonathan, whose arm hung limp at his side. "You fool," she whispered, brushing soot from his cheek, her hands trembling. "You reckless, wonderful fool." He managed a crooked smile. "No one else was close enough. Is everyone safe?" "They are, thanks to you." Her voice broke, the enormity of what they had faced together sweeping over her. By dawn, the fire was out. The cottages were blackened but standing, and no lives had been lost. Eleanor moved among the villagers with quiet authority, comforting, organizing, promising funds for repairs. Her gown was singed, her hair tumbled loose, but the villagers looked at her with new respect, gratitude softening eyes that had been hard with suspicion only hours before. Jonathan, pale and in pain, was carried to Halliwick. Eleanor insisted on tending him herself, despite Mrs. Welling's protests. "In the morning room, please," Eleanor directed. "Mary, bring fresh water. Catherine, some bandages from the linen press." He lay back as she cleaned and bound his wounded arm, her touch gentle but sure. For a long moment, neither spoke, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the faint stir of dawn beyond the windows. At last, Jonathan broke the silence. "You were magnificent tonight, Eleanor. The estate could not ask for a better mistress." She shook her head, blinking back tears. "I only did what was needed. We both did." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm despite the feverish flush in his cheeks. "You did more. You brought them together. You gave them hope. I see now what I failed to give all those years." She looked away, her voice trembling. "And yet, it is only now, when everything is lost and found again, that I understand what matters. I was so bent on justice, on pride. I nearly missed the greater good." Jonathan squeezed her hand. "You have always been braver than I, Eleanor. It is not too late for any of us." A silence fell, deeper and more intimate than any they had known. Eleanor's eyes met his, and the years of regret and longing fell away. "I was wrong to hate you," she whispered. "I was wrong to think forgiveness meant forgetting. It does not. It means remembering and choosing love anyway." He pulled her hand to his lips, his voice thick with emotion. "Eleanor, I have loved you from the beginning. I was a coward, and I paid dearly for it. If you can forgive me, if you can find it in your heart to begin again." She pressed a trembling finger to his lips. "We will begin again, together. Not as master and mistress, not as adversaries, but as ourselves." The door opened quietly. Lady Pembroke entered, her usual frailty replaced by a regal calm. She took in the scene, her son, wounded but alive, Eleanor, fierce and tender at his side, and nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "You have my blessing, Eleanor," she said, voice clear. "You have earned it 100 times over." Catherine and Mary joined them, smiles breaking through exhaustion. Word spread swiftly through the house and village that Miss Ashcombe had nursed Mr. Pembroke herself, that the two had spoken at last, not as rivals, but as beloveds. That afternoon, as Jonathan rested, Eleanor walked through Halliwick's halls. She was greeted by the staff not with silence, but with warm words and grateful nods. In the village, the children ran to her. The old men tipped their caps. The house, the land, the people, all seemed to breathe easier, as if the fire had burned away the last remnants of suspicion and sorrow. But as dusk fell, a letter arrived at Halliwick's door, sealed with an unfamiliar crest. Eleanor broke it open, her heart quickening as she read the words inside, a summons that threatened to upend the fragile peace, and draw her and Jonathan into a challenge neither could have foreseen. Spring unfurled itself across Halliwick, coaxing the gardens into riotous bloom and gilding the old stone walls with new promise. Months had passed since the fire, and with them, the sense of siege and sorrow that once clung to the estate had faded. In its place was a spirit of industrious hope, as if the land itself had chosen to begin again. Eleanor walked the grounds each morning, her skirts brushing dew-laden grass, her head held high not in defiance, but in quiet contentment. The staff greeted her with genuine warmth now, their suspicion melted by her tireless efforts and her willingness to listen. She knew their names, their troubles, and their joys. Where once her reforms had been met with grumbling, now there was pride in Halliwick's prosperity. The new school bustled with children, the dispensary served every family, and the fields flourished under careful stewardship. Jonathan was always near, sometimes in the fields with the tenants, sometimes beside her at the steward's desk, reviewing plans for irrigation or new cottages. No longer lord and lady, divided by pride, they were partners, their strengths woven together through trust and the hard-won peace of forgiveness. One golden afternoon, Eleanor sat beneath the great beech tree with Mary and Catherine, laughter and birdsong mingling in the air. Mary's eyes sparkled with excitement as she spoke of her plans to travel to London and study with a celebrated botanist. Catherine, her cheeks aglow, confided that she had accepted a post assisting the village schoolmistress. "It is you who have shown us how to begin again," Mary said, her voice warm. "If not for your courage, I would never have dared to leave Dorset." Eleanor squeezed her cousin's hand. "You always had courage, Mary. You simply needed to believe it." Jonathan appeared on the terrace, a letter in hand. "A reply from Lady Ferndale," he announced, amusement in his eyes. "She writes that our news is most unexpected, but perhaps in time, not altogether unwelcome." Eleanor laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "High praise, indeed. I suppose society must have its drama, but at least now it is of the gentler sort." Word of their engagement had swept the county with predictable shock, followed by a slow, cautious acceptance. The parish vicar offered a heartfelt blessing. The villagers, once wary, now gathered at the gates to cheer as Eleanor and Jonathan rode out together. Even the local gentry, after much deliberation, and more than one raised eyebrow, extended invitations to dinners and picnics, eager to bask in the glow of Hallowell's renewed good fortune. Their announcement had been simple and private. Jonathan took Eleanor's hand as they walked beneath the blossoming orchard, his voice steady. "We have seen the worst of one another and the best. I would not trade a single day of it, Eleanor. Will you marry me? Not for duty or pride, but for hope." She had smiled through tears, her answer sure. Yes, for hope and for love. The days that followed brimmed with a quiet joy. Together, they planned not only a future for themselves, but for all of Halewick's people. Jonathan's counsel was sought and valued. Eleanor's vision guided each new undertaking. The estate, once a battleground of old wounds, was now a place where laughter rang in the kitchens, where children raced down the lanes, and where every harvest festival was marked with gratitude. One evening, as the sun slipped low and painted the fields in hues of rose and gold, Eleanor and Jonathan walked the boundary path, arm in arm. The air was sweet with the scent of lilac, and the house behind them glowed with candlelight. Jonathan paused, his gaze tracing the familiar lines of the land. "There was a time I thought I would never see Halewick whole again, or myself, for that matter." Eleanor leaned into his side, her voice soft. "It was broken, as were we, but it is not the breaking that matters. It is what we choose to build from the pieces." He studied her, awe and tenderness mingling in his eyes. "You have forgiven me for more than I ever thought possible." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his brow. "Forgiveness is not forgetting, Jonathan. The past is still with us, but it no longer commands us. We have chosen something stronger." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, a gesture of reverence and devotion. "You have given me a future I thought lost. I will spend every day earning it." They lingered, watching as the last light faded from the hills. In the hush, Eleanor spoke, her voice carrying the weight and the hope of all they had endured. "This place was once only a memory of pain for me. Now it is a promise, not of perfection, but of striving, of love, and of mercy." Jonathan took her hand, their fingers entwined. "We are our own legacy now, Eleanor. Whatever comes, we will face it together." In the distance, Mary and Catherine's laughter floated on the breeze, a sign of the new life taking root all around them. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the steadiness of Jonathan's heartbeat and the certainty of a future made not by vengeance, but by grace. As darkness fell, the lights of Hallowell shone against the night, a beacon of what forgiveness could accomplish, and the beginning of a legacy that would endure long after memory faded. And as Eleanor and Jonathan turned toward home, the past at last laid to rest. Hope and love lit the path ahead.